In the book of Isaiah, chapter 60, written around 500 BCE, it is written, "Arise, Jerusalem, and shine like the sun. The glory of the Lord is shining upon you. The sovereign Lord has filled me with his Spirit. He has chosen me and sent me to bring good news to the poor, to heal the brokenhearted, to announce release to captives and freedom to those in prison. He has sent me to proclaim that the time has come when the Lord will save his people and defeat their enemies. He has sent me to comfort all who mourn, to give to those who mourn in Zion joy and gladness instead of grief, a song of praise instead of sorrow. They will be like trees that the Lord himself has planted. They will all do what is right, and God will be praised for what he has done." And some 500 years later, it is said that Jesus went to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And on the Sabbath, he went as usual to the synagogue. He stood up to read the scriptures and was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah. He unrolled the scroll and found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has chosen me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free the oppressed, and announce that the time has come when the Lord will save his people." Jesus rolled up the scroll, gave it back to the attendant, and sat down. All the people in the synagogue had their eyes fixed on him. When I was at military boot camp, I had to learn how to navigate the countryside. One night, or should I say at 2 a.m, I was rousted from sleep in my tent by the sound of truck horns and the blinding glare of their high beams. In a flash, my fellow chaplains and I were pulled from our sleeping bags and thrown into the back of these trucks by burly corporals and threatening sergeants, specially recruited, I'm sure, to give us a rough go. Once we were in the troop trucks, the back flaps were pulled down, leaving us all in pitch blackness. And then, as fast as the trucks had entered our camp, we were barreling down dirt roads at breakneck speed on our way to God knows where. We would later learn that each truck had taken a different road. After a few minutes, the truck I was in came to a halt. We heard the cab doors slam shut, and seconds later, the back flap flew open. One of my buddies, closest to the back, was hauled out of the truck. The flap was quickly closed again, and back we were in total darkness. All we could hear was the sound of boots scuffling through dirt and grass, growing fainter and fainter until finally no sound at all. After a minute or two, the truck lurched, the cab doors were slammed shut, and within seconds we were once again barreling down this bumpy, dirty road. The process would continue until finally it was my turn to be pulled off the truck. The driver and his sidekick, they hauled me down, then dragged me off into the woods. I was given a topographical map, a compass, a small flashlight, a pencil, a scrap of paper, and a whistle. The two men left, saying, "Here's where you are," pointing so fast to the map that for me it didn't register. "Now find your way back to camp. If you can't, blow the whistle. Maybe we'll hear you, or maybe not." From that moment till about 3 hours later, when I finally blew my whistle, I was hopelessly lost. The exercise had been to test our knowledge of navigation before we started the course. The instructors had wanted to get a picture of what we already knew. And I dare say that within a few hours, the instructors discovered that I knew nothing. They came to know that I had been lost the whole time and had had no idea whatsoever of how to get back to camp. That my so-called return to camp kit had been all I needed, only I didn't know how to use it. Have you ever been lost? Have you ever been lost like I was lost? Have you ever been lost looking for your way home? Of course, there's all kinds of ways of being lost. We can be lost like I was, physically. Or we can be lost in our sorrow or in our despair. We can be lost in our troubles, in our struggles, or lost in our sin or in our fear. Lost. Still alive, barely, but unmistakably lost. I find it telling that the first time Jesus spoke in the synagogue, he read from the book of the prophet Isaiah. And when he finished reading and setting the scroll aside, he said that the prophetic words were now fulfilled in him, as they had been centuries before in the prophet Isaiah. Jesus said that the words of healing and hope that had been held in the hearts of people for so long were now fulfilled once again in him. Once more, God's favor was set to be poured out onto the people. Hear again what Jesus read and Isaiah said. "The Spirit of the Lord is on me, because he has anointed me to preach good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to release the oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." The prophet Isaiah had written, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. A great light on those living in the land of the shadow of death. A light has dawned." The same light for the darkness had come in Jesus. Light to drive away the shadows. Light, not unlike my flashlight, my compass, and my whistle, to show the way home. John, the gospel writer John, said of Jesus, "In him was life, and the life was light to all." The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Life and light are what he is. In this season of the church, which we call Epiphany, we celebrate the life and the light which are found in him. That's Epiphany. We have been redeemed. We've been restored. We've been the recipients of God's blessings. And as John Newton would write in his hymn, Amazing Grace, we were lost and now are found. We were blind and now we see. But I ask you this, for what purpose? To what end? As you know, I often talk not only about God's love for us, but of the necessity, because of that love, to become loving ourselves. To become for others all that our Lord has become for us. As one man expressed to me after church one Sunday, he really loves the Celtic prayer I often use at the close of our services. It challenges him to strive to be the man that Christ would have him be. The prayer ends, of course, with the words, "May you see the face of Christ in everyone you meet, and may everyone you meet see the face of Christ in you." In other words, we are to become Christ to our neighbors. And I believe that end is expressed gloriously by Howard Thurman in a poem entitled The Work of Christmas. He writes, "When the song of the angel is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins. To find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to make peace among brothers and sisters, to make music in the heart." So, folks, we have work to do. It's the work of Christmas. It's the work of all that Jesus means to us. But before I illustrate how others have done this work of Christmas, how others have let their lives and their light shine for others, just think of this. Jesus said that he was the light of the world. Yet, astonishingly, Jesus refers to us in exactly the same way. "You are the light of the world," he said. "Let your light shine before people." We have the opportunity in the seasons of darkness that many people experience to transform those seasons into seasons of light. In doing the work of Christmas in this season of light, the call is to make music in other people's hearts. And the possibility exists that if we strive toward that end, It can happen. It can happen. Consider this simple story of love and light. Tears ran down the face of Salvation Army officer Shaw as he looked at the three men in front of him. Shaw was a medical missionary who had just arrived in India at the turn of the 20th century. But the three lepers that stood before him were manacled and fettered. Their feet and hands were bound tight, cutting the diseased flesh. Captain Shaw turned to the guard and said, "Please, unfasten the chains." "It isn't safe," the guard replied. "These men are dangerous criminals as well as lepers." "I'll be responsible. They're suffering enough," Captain Shaw answered as he put out his hand and took the keys. He knelt on the ground, removed the shackles, and treated their wounds. 2 weeks later, Captain Shaw had his first misgivings about freeing those criminals. He had to take an overnight trip and dreaded leaving his wife alone at home. But his wife was also a Salvation Army officer. She insisted that she was not afraid, and so her husband left. The next morning, when she went to her front door, she was startled to see the three criminals lying on her steps. One explained in his broken English, "We knew the doctor left. We stayed here so no harm would come to you." The work of Christmas, to find the lost, to heal the broken, to release the prisoner, had begun. It had begun in those three leper criminals and two Salvation Army officers. It has been said that it isn't the greatness of the deed that matters, but the greatness of the love that accompanies it. Or as Eric Maxwell of our own congregation reminded me one day, a man shows who he is by what he does with what he has. Wasn't this the way the dangerous men responded to Captain Shaw's simple act of love? And because of how they responded, a season of darkness became a season of light. It suggests how easily miracles can be fashioned. How many troubled, crooked, miserable conditions there are just waiting for the arrival of some simple human ministry. And as a result, be totally transformed. Jesus said, and says still, you and you and you and you are the light of the world. Let your light shine before people. That's our job. That's the work we must do. That's the work of Christmas we are called to do, each and every one of us. And so, I pray, make it your work to transform someone's season of darkness into a season of light. Love him. Help her. Encourage him and him and him and her and her and her. Be the heart through which Christ loves. Be the hand through which he helps. Be the ear through which he listens. Be the voice through which he speaks. In other words, let your life shine, radiate for him. And the people said,